friends, welcome to episode 123 of Storyteller Conclave. This is a show all about helping you run the best tabletop role-playing game that you can, whether you're a new storyteller or dungeon master learning the craft, or an experienced storyteller looking to take your game to the next level. I'm Sarah.
And I have a full glass of wine.
Yeah.
I'm Rob.
It's one behind the empty glass of wine, huh?
Yeah, I think so. I think I'm one ahead tonight, so.
Yeah, right on.
I'm not saying like I needed this, but we had a good dinner and it tasted really good, and I'm like, nobody else is really drinking this white, and I can't let it go to waste.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So, 123.
123.
Yeah.
That number keeps ticking up, and I'm always amazed by it.
Yeah.
Every time it does.
Yeah. So part of it is like, are we really doing this?
Mm-hmm.
Is this just us keeping track of our conversations?
Kind of, yeah.
I think that's
our therapy log. I'm going to bill you, actually, at the end of this. When we hit 200, you're just going to get a big fat bill from me.
I thought it works the other way around. Anyway, so yeah, just come visit our website, check out our Instagram, go to our Facebook page, like some things. We love it. It's actually helped us out. Funny enough, we have listeners, and I'd like to say thank you to you in Australia and Ireland. We got a big uptick in both of those areas, so thank you for listening in those areas, and we would love for you to join the Discord and submit questions and join us, please.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't forget to also throw us a review on your podcasting
please,
software too, like Apple Podcasts and stuff like that. You know,
Yeah.
throw us a quick 5-star. It really helps us out in the algorithm.
Spotify's the other one. We've got tons of people listening to us on Spotify. So if you subscribe to us on Spotify, I think you can rate it on there as well.
Yeah.
So please throw us a rating, do something, because the more people who do that, the more movement we get, and more people get to hear us. So that'd be fun. We'd love to grow the community. So.
So you had your D&D game.
I did, and I did some neat stuff in it that I didn't normally do, and I think it worked pretty darn well. So I was coming up to last week, and I had done a lot of pre-writing, which was great. And I apologize, by the way, my neighbor decided he was going to mow right now. So if you're hearing that in the background, I don't know if you're going to hear it or not, but
yeah,
if he gets close, you might hear it. Anywho, so I was coming out at the beginning of August, and I got all my writing done. I knew where the direction of the game was, and I decided to write light. I did it, this is kind of the wrap up to the act, and I kind of just wanted to have a little final piece that kind of gave you guys direction and kind of put things in perspective. So you had just finished up the gate and destroying it and destroying a few other ideas that I had with that, which was great. I think it worked out fantastically. We got to see an actual use not this past session, but the one before, of divine intervention, divinely interventing. It was incredible, with someone rolling a 1, which means it happened, which is incrable.
You have to roll under your character level. At this point was 10.
And they rolled a 1. And it was fantastic. So we, so that happened, which brought back a key NPC a lot earlier than I expected, which is fine. So there'll be some changes that are going to come from that, and already have.
Sure.
But you guys were going to the Orcs garrison and prison, which is attached to their mountain range. And dealing with some stuff going on there, and I kind of had wanted to do an actual physical setup for this to give you guys a little bit of tactical stuff, but as it came down to the wire, I was like, I really don't have a good way of displaying this. So I went ahead and used Dungeon Draft to draw it all up, and then had it printed. At Kinko's, of all things, the FedEx Kinko's location.
Just a big poster-sized map.
Yeah, for like $18, I ended up with a perfect map that was grid perfect, and forgot that I still had all the skills to figure out how to do that in a single shot. And the only problem that I had was some lighting on it, but the funny enough people at Kinko's were just like, I want to talk to you about your poster, everything outside the stables on the garrison. And I'm like, that is very thoughtful that you actually read the file name and can look at the map and tell me what those things are.
Oh, nice.
I did a good job. So it did work out, and I think it looked good for you guys and gave you a good feeling for it.
Yeah.
And it was super easy, like barely inconvenience. But I think some of the stuff that I really enjoyed about that was I grabbed an idea from one of our listeners, actually, and instituted using a visual method for our
Initiative.
initiative. Thank
Keeping
you.
track of the initiative, yeah.
Yeah. And so I made little tent cards out of pieces of 3x5 card.
Yeah.
With initials for everybody and for the bad guys.
And you hung them over the edge of your DM screen.
Yep. And did a start and an end, so you guys knew exactly the order, and we just shuffled through them. And honestly, it was one of the greatest visual tools I've had for a while. It's very simply done.
It's one of those things I always mean to do, and then just I don't. Like, the moment we roll initiative, then I'm like, oh, shoot, I should have done the thing.
And the second thing I did was another thing that I had read about people doing and had never really done it myself, and that was give control of tracking the NPC's health and AC to a player. I actually gave it to you.
That was stressful.
I understand, but at the same time... At no point did you not know the health of what was going around.
That's true.
You could easily... And that makes sense, because you're in the combat. You can see how bloody they are.
Yeah.
It isn't just a blob that is sucking up all the damage until it turns into ooze on the floor, you know? And that's the difference there, is that it gave you guys a little bit of control there. It took it out of my purview so I could focus on the combat as a whole and really get a feel for what was going on and make sure that I had the beats that I wanted to have occur within the combat, regardless of what your guys' actions were.
You know, this is kind of a side conversation too, but as I've been kind of delving into Savage Worlds and like listening to podcasts and stuff that regarding how to run that game and whatnot, more and more I'm hearing the idea of like DM screens are actually damaging to the player-DM relationship, and you should just do away with them. Just roll out in the open. Like, there's nothing... other than keeping some notes to yourself about like where the plot's going and stuff like that, there's no reason you need to hide anything behind a DM screen. It's a relic of the adversarial DM-player relationship.
I completely agree with that. The only thing I do like about my DM screen is it literally has all the tools I need in front of
me. There's a big difference between vertical cheat sheet and DM screen. Like, you're not using it to hide things. You're using it because it has a bunch of calculations on it for
and
you.
It makes it totally... And I always roll in my basket, which is right next to Vicky anyway. So.
And even converting over to Savage Worlds, I will still continue to use the Savage World's DM screen because, like you said, it's got a bunch of charts and stuff like that on the cheat sheets on the back of it. So, but not because I feel like I need to hide anything from you.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, well, good. I mean, and it was from player perspective, it was a satisfying game. It was a bit short, but that's a complaint you love to hear as a storyteller of like, why is D&D ending already? I would like more, please. You know,
and that's what I wanted to get to. Is I wanted to get to either a good place to pause, without pushing and making everybody tired and exhausted, and keep the energy going, help that desire for more.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. All right, so we do have a main topic today. You want to get on that?
Yeah. So this is our third Wednesday of the month.
Second Wednesday of the month.
I always lose track.
Always a system spotlight for us.
So we're doing SCP. Secure, Contain, and Protect, the RPG.
Yeah. No, this was one that actually just came out very recently.
August, right?
Yeah.
Beginning of August.
No, it was July, I want to say.
Okay.
Because it was I.
That's right. You had
no
it.
June. It came out in June because I was able to order it before Sean's birthday.
Yep.
And his birthday's in July, so and I'd ordered it as a birthday present for him because he is a huge fan of SCP.
Now, SCP itself is kind of an interesting story.
Yeah, so SCP actually kind of started out, it's become kind of a cultural phenomenon. It started out as just a post on the paranormal forum of 4chan.
Yes.
Somebody had found some weird picture of this, like, art project thing. It was this weird, creepy doll with these weird colors on it. And so somebody posted that picture and wrote this like pseudo-scientific document. It was all redacted and, you know, like creepy things of like the secure containment procedure, SCP, for this particular thing that he turned into this weird creepypasta.
Yeah.
And he called it SCP-173. And that was back in like 2007. So it kind of very much like Slender Man. It started off as this online creepypasta, and then somebody kind of grabbed that and was like, "That's a cool idea. I'm going to expand off of it."
And made another one.
And pretty soon you had this this wiki basically put together where people were starting to consolidate and put these things and then submit new ones to this wiki, and it just became the home of this essentially collaborative writing project.
Yeah.
So what makes an SCP is it's not just horror writing. And it's not all horror, honestly.
No, it's definitely not all horror.
There are some really, honestly, like, funny ones. There are some really cute ones. Those, I would say, are the exception, not the rule.
Yeah.
It's mostly horror.
Yeah, someone wrote one based upon the piece of art where the teddy bear is defending the kid at bed from a monster.
Yeah.
And it's about the sword the teddy bear has.
Aww.
And I thought that was really cute.
That's cute, yeah.
But it's like, it's just a wooden sword that you wouldn't think anything about, but if you place it near a toy, the toy becomes alive and will defend it from any intruder that is near a child.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, and it's just a neat little thing, but again, written in a very scientific perspective. So
and so all these SCPs are basically like they're written up as if they were the safety documents for these weird things. The secure containment procedures.
Yep.
It doesn't even talk about the object at first. It just talks about like this thing must be stored in these conditions in a darkened room, no bigger than 4 meters square, with no cameras on the inside, no personnel are to interact with it directly.
Levels C and D are the only ones allowed to access the space in case of a condition redacted, or this condition redacted, or fire.
Exactly. If anyone comes into contact with it, they are to be, transferred off base, for no fewer than 4 months.
Yeah.
If they display redacted symptoms, have them eliminated immediately.
Yeah.
And then they talk a little bit about experiments that they've run on it, but like very rarely is it ever described in like a story way. It's always this cold, clinical, and man, there's some chilling stuff up there.
Yeah, and it's because it's so clinical, you're not even sure where it came from or how they came into possession with it sometimes,
right?
Because there may be no prior story.
No, but that's the other interesting part, is that this project, I mean, this has been going since like 2007, 2008, right?
Yeah.
So obviously there's like 12, 13 years worth of additions to this thing, and it's grown.
I think
so
they
much.
said when I was up there, they're in 6. They're in like series 6 of it now. And I thought that was pretty cool, like that they series it out because there's just so much content.
And I think each series has like 2,000 or 4,000 things in them. So I mean, you get the breadth and scope of it. But there's been kind of an emergent metaverse that's kind of come out of it, and that's, I think, what kind of leads us into the role playing game, is that obviously as people are writing about these containment procedures and stuff like that, you kind of get a meta story about the SCP Foundation in and of itself.
Right.
Is this super governmental agency that like answers to no one, very Men in Black style, that polices the entire world to basically try to keep these things out of the hands of normal mortal people, or especially other organizations that may want to use them for their own purposes.
Right.
And if they can't be contained in like the traditional sense of like I brought it home and locked it up,
right?
Because some of these things are like extra dimensional rifts that exist, in 30-acre, blocking those things off and making sure that like you have a tidy little Area 51 sort of thing around it that no satellites can see into, and no people can get into. But then, of course, you've got this other meta-narrative that's kind of emerged about, well, what other organizations?
Right.
And so some of the documents say things like, oh, yeah, we reclaimed this from agents of the, whatever organization.
It was a Church of the Broken God.
Yeah, Church of the yeah, exactly.
And you're
what
like,
the hell is that?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden people read that and they get inspired by it, and now other articles start popping up about Church of the Broken God and things relating to them, and then that sprouts a meta-narrative, and it's this cool collaborative storytelling universe about this dark pseudo-intelligence network protecting humanity from these strange things, and like verging to alternate timelines and alternate realities and stuff like that. It gets real deep. That rabbit hole goes real deep.
Yeah, but it's I think that's what gets me kind of interested in it, is because it's emergent. It's not just chaos. There's some kind of community elements because of the simplicity of the design. And that things aren't necessarily hard canon. That, like, there's no one saying, well, you can't use this, this level of person with this level of security to contain this type of a thing. Like, that's not there. Because it's up to the design of the storyteller to grab these elements that they've heard about from other places and have kind of just latched on and attached them into their stories.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I know, there's like an approval process, but I
that's
mean,
it.
Other than that, yeah, there's no technical canon,
right?
And
I think for that, I mean, it's literally like you've got thousands of players around a table.
It's thousands of players yes-anding each other.
Correct, and then only on occasion do they go, I think you're missing the feel of your story.
Yeah.
Can we suggest this?
Yeah.
And that's it. Simple as that.
Can you phrase it like this?
Yeah.
And so it's branched off a bit from there too. Like, it's not just on the wiki anymore. Obviously, with 13 years and this much time and space to grow in popularity in the zeitgeist. So we've got a novel series. That's out there. There's dozens of paperback books up on Amazon.
Oh God, yeah.
There's a 3-part art book on Indiegogo. I didn't know about that one.
Yep. I just saw that. There's the Wanderer Library, which is the sister website. That's got more than just the scientific reports.
That's got the more like the fiction in there. Like, people actually write stories, like novelizations.
Yep. And then there was a what was it? A stage play that was put together in England. The Welcome to the Ethics Committee was performed, and then the Glasgow New Music Expedition did a performed work of SCP Foundation during the 10th annual Pug Festival as well. So I mean, it's branched in all kinds of directions.
Yeah. There have been some short films. There's some really great short films up on YouTube with some really amazing production quality.
Yeah.
You and I believe, in our tactical shooter fandom.
Yes.
Are you familiar with Operator Drewski?
Yeah, I know Drewski.
So Drewski was in one of these SCP films.
Yep, I remember that one. Yeah.
As an extra, as a Marine. And so we watched them all, and they were amazing, absolutely amazing.
So
there's been some video games too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So there was Containment Breach, which is probably the most known one.
It was based on the original 173.
Yep.
Because 173 is very much like the Weeping Angels from.
It's got the blink thing going on.
Where if you're looking at it, it can't move.
Right.
And so they baked that in. One person plays SCP-173, and everybody else plays. It's an asymmetrical horror game.
Yep.
Where everybody else plays Marines or researchers or whatever that are trying to get out of the facility.
Yep.
And so every time you turn your back on 173, he gets to move.
Yep.
And he moves fast. And if he touches you, you die.
Yep.
So it's...
And it's supposed to be at an SCP facility. And it's I've seen it a couple times.
Hence,
like played.
Containment Breach. Yeah. Oh yeah, it's crazy.
It's funny at times. I'm trying to think of who the last person I saw play it. But it was amusing to say the least. You have Secret Laboratory, right?
Yeah, Secret Laboratory, yep.
And then there were two that were based upon SCP numbers.
Okay.
That I think are both in process. One is SCP-3008, which is a horror game, I think. And then you've got SCP-087, which is another one, but I think it's single player. I think one's multiplayer, one's single player.
Okay.
And then I want to say there was Control. That's the other one, the most recent in 2019.
Control isn't an SCP game, but holy cow,
heavily
you can
influenced.
Really see the influence in there.
They said that they looked at it, and it was kind of like a game of love.
Yeah,
to it,
an homage.
Like an ode, if you will.
Definitely an homage to it, yeah.
So
if you're familiar with Control, and you're wondering what the feel of the SCP is, that's it.
Yeah, that's the organization. So I went looking for a writer who describes what the feel of SCP is, and I found this thing. on the wiki that I thought really did a good job, which is Winston Cook Wilson, who was writing for Inverse at the time, said, like Lovecraft, SCP Foundation case files generally lack action sequences and are written in a pseudo-academic tone. But the SCP Foundation were strengthened by the tensions between their detached scientific tone and the unsettling, horrific nature of the story being told.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all very clinical.
Clinically describing the dismemberment of a D-class personnel when the experiment went wrong.
With heavy redactions.
With heavy redactions.
So
where we recovered the body of the D-class personnel who exhibited redacted, and his head was redacted.
Yeah.
Yes. So.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
so that is what this
That's
game
the
is.
feel.
That is what this game is based on,
Yes.
and that's essentially the universe into which this game tries to take us.
That
Now,
being said.
That being said, we get into the mechanics. And I think there's just a moment where we both just need to sigh.
Yeah. So reading through the mechanics of this game, I think both of us had the realization that we needed to figure out where the author of these mechanics was coming from.
Mm-hmm.
And because it felt like a mix of mechanics. To me.
I don't know that it definitely feels like there's not a lot of flow to the mechanics. Like coming from Savage Worlds or coming from years worth of D20,
Yeah.
Be that 3.5, be that 4, be that 5 D&D. The mechanics were always very smooth in that everything revolved around a D20.
Or a D10 or a D6.
Right.
Yeah.
So most roles follow the exact same,
Basic
familiar
mechanic
to it.
This kind of feels a little like, to me, like Savage Worlds meets Shadowrun.
It's definitely heavily Shadowrun influenced. The more I looked into it, and especially we'd found that interview with the creator of this, and he talked a lot about the Shadowrun influence behind it, and you can really see it. Like if you know Shadowrun, you can start looking at this, and it's quite possible that players of Shadowrun would adore this system.
Yes,
I think I know there are some listeners out there who love to play the crunch drinking game. They take a shot every time we say crunch.
Prepare yourselves. The crunch is thick.
You are going to lose
I
track
have my own wine glass right here. I expect to finish it.
Yeah.
And have to find the bottle. So
crunch gamers, you're about to lose control of your extremities by about the 15-minute mark.
And I'm going to straight up tell you at the 15-minute mark, we're probably going to pause mechanics at that point and get on with the rest of the thing. So,
all right. So, the basis of the mechanics is a roll and keep system.
Simple as that.
So a little bit like 7th Sea in that you're going to have a dice pool. Okay, you're going to be grabbing multiple dice.
Yes.
Relating to the attribute which you're rolling.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to roll you're going to choose 4 dice out of your dice pool, and your dice pool will consist of D8s, D10s, and D12s.
Yes.
You're going to grab 4 of those. Roll them. You're going to take the highest 2 values and add them together.
Keeping in mind that dice can explode.
So, if your dice explode, though, you don't roll them and add them to the base value. You just add more dice to your pool.
Right.
If a D8 explodes, you add 2 D10. If a D10 explodes, you add a D12. If a D12 explodes, you actually add a D20.
Mm-hmm.
And you roll those as well. So it's not a guaranteed high number. It just gives you more dice into your dice pool, another opportunity to get an even higher number.
Right.
Because it also adds the next highest die.
Right.
And again, you'll just basically, however many explode, you just keep going until you get the 2 highest numbers and then add them together.
Right.
Typically, you'll also add your proficiency value. Your proficiencies are basically skills. We'll talk about those in a moment.
Yeah.
To it. So say you've got a 2 in firearms. I roll a combined 11. I now have a 13. And then this basically is just compared against a difficulty range. So 6 is something that's very easy. 11 to 14 is in the average range. 18 to 24 is almost impossible. And 25 plus is godlike.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's, like I said, there's some modifiers to that. So your explosions are, as we just listed, they add more dice to your pool of the next highest type.
If you roll a 1, you set those to the side and subtract them at the end.
Right. So if I rolled 2 1s as I was doing that, I would then subtract 2 from my total at the end.
And that includes your exploded dice.
Yes.
So you have to keep that in mind.
Critical success and failure is basically just on thresholds. So if I roll twice the difficulty I needed, I critically succeeded. If I roll under half the difficulty that I needed, I've critically failed.
Yep.
And so that, sounds pretty okay.
It's definitely more complex than a lot of games are.
Yeah.
But, it's not the most complex I've heard.
It's mostly just because, and this is, you see, the dice pool mechanics, you can really see the Shadowrun influence there.
Very much so.
Rolling dice, and if you roll those dice well enough, it gives you the opportunity to roll even more dice to see where your total is.
Right. Which, I guess if you want to enjoy dice, this game has dice.
Yeah. Yep, there is. So then you go into character creation. So what actually is a character in the SCP game here? So you got 8 attributes. Strength, health, perception, dexterity, fate, which is basically your luck stat, charisma, intelligence, and willpower.
Yep.
Now, each one of those attributes you're going to essentially purchase dice for. You don't have
It's a point-buy system.
Yeah, well, yeah, and it's not. It's a point-buy system, but again, you don't have a numerical value. You're not going to have a 10 strength.
Right.
You're going to have
a dice set,
4d4, 2d10 in strength.
Right.
Because that's what your dice pool is.
Right.
And it's kind of in a grid, in that you need to purchase 2d8 before you can buy the d10 above it. And then you need to purchase the other 2d8 and the other d10, so you have 2d10 before you can purchase the d12 above it.
Right.
And all of these end up basically filling in little boxes to indicate what they are.
But it gives you the option to roll 4 of those dice of your choice.
Exactly.
You don't have to just roll the top ones. You can roll other dice if you want to.
Yeah. Technically, you've got a better chance of rolling an 8 and getting an exploding die if you roll a d8 than you do a d10.
Right.
By about 4%, I think.
Right.
But you can. And then as you're purchasing these dice at your dice pool, a lot of these boxes will have little markers in them indicating that they give you certain bonuses when you purchase them.
Yep.
So strength will modify your melee damage. Health straight up modifies your HP.
Yeah.
Perception will modify your ranged attacks. Dexterity modifies your movement speed. Fate gives you reverence points, which we'll get to in a moment.
Reverence, yeah.
Charisma is kind of your social interaction stat that doesn't modify much. Intelligence actually modifies the amount of skill points that you have.
Yeah, and your initiative.
And it modifies your initiative.
Which I like.
Willpower modifies your exertion points.
Yeah.
And then that's kind of the other thing, too, is that there's a lot of, purchasable substats.
Well, and that kind of leads right into the proficiency system.
Yeah.
Which feels immense because they have knowledges and skills and abilities. And again, it's point buy again. So you have skills that have a numerical value, but also include decimals, which I think is odd.
Well, the designer was noting that he saw in other game systems that in especially prolonged play, you would have players that would just max their stuff out in the 4th game, and they go from 0 to godhood in the span of a month worth of game time,
right?
And he didn't want that to happen, so he implemented a very small incremental advancement system. So instead of going from a 1 to 2 in handguns, you go from a 1 to a 1.2.
Well, and the other thing is that at character creation, you actually roll for your point. So you put points into it, but then you also get to roll a die, and that becomes the decimal value.
Yes.
So you have a random factor that goes into how good at a skill you are.
Yeah, and one of the other things that I did like about it, actually, is that if you have 0 in a skill, you can still attempt it.
Correct.
Right? And the first time you attempt a skill with 0 in it, you roll is a d6, I think?
Yeah.
And then if you're purchasing it with XP, you roll a D8
Mm-hmm.
and get your decimal value out of that. So you might pick up a handgun for the very first time ever, start wielding it, and end up with a .6 in it after you first wielded it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, now mind you that gets added after the initial
roll.
Yeah. But still, no, I kind of like that whole like, okay, I've got a little experience with it now. You know,
And with, like we talked about with Shadowrun, it gets very granular. So, like, it's not just rifle. There's assault rifle versus, sniper rifle.
versus shotgun versus handgun versus submachine gun. Those are all separate skills.
Yeah.
And again, you see the Shadowrun influence in it, and that you've got multiple different skills for everything. And then there's a rule where if you don't have the exact skill, you can use a similar skill at -2 or something?
Yeah, so like if
at a minus.
Like if I don't have what was it? If I don't have swimming, I could still use my athletics.
Yes.
And still try it.
Yeah, if I don't have handgun, I can still use submachine gun and still try it.
Yep.
Yeah. And again, that's a very Shadowrun thing where you've got a skill tree that's implemented, and you can kind of like bounce around that skill tree. Where if you've got an applicable skill, it may not be the exact one, you can still do it at a slight penalty.
Right.
And the other thing too, and this is kind of neat with the decimals, is that since you're not dealing with whole numbers, you get very granular with what your actual like skill total is. So I might roll my dice, and after adding my proficiencies and modifiers and whatnot, I might add up with a 13.7. And the character I'm trying to hit might have a 13.4 defense.
Right.
Now, ordinarily, if we were using integers, 13 versus 13, okay, maybe the tie goes to me anyway, but I hit him by 0.3, you know, and you feel that. You feel that graze. So, I mean, take that for what it is. I thought it was a neat feeling. I'm not sure that I like it from the standpoint of like, oh, I think this is a good idea. But I see where they're going with it, and it was something that did kind of make me, go, hey, actually, that's kind of neat.
It is. Again,
that could play out in some interesting ways.
I think for the type of game that it's portraying is interesting, and I'll get to that about how the mechanics versus the feel, and where I think. But I think on a straight mechanics base, it feels very much like Shadowrun.
Yeah.
Almost second edition Shadowrun more than anything else, where you are rooted in technical, individualized pieces, and managing all the points and dots and making it feel needing to be perfect.
Yeah.
But at the same time, at that granular level, you know who you are. So, and then you've got underneath those, I think they call them substats, right?
Yeah, they're called substats.
Or derived stats.
I call them derived stats because they're derived from other stats that you've already picked.
Like your health, your exertion.
Yeah, so...
cognitive resistance is the one that I wanted to jump on.
Yeah.
Because I think that's a great concept for this game, especially because it's kind of got a Cthulhian edge to it. You've got to be able to have a hardened mind, but it's not just going to be your intelligence. It has to do more than that. So it's your exertion, your self-control, and reasoning.
One of your proficiencies in self-control is a proficiency.
Right.
And then reasoning modifier is... We'll get to reasoning modifier in a second. Actually, as one of those things that I do count as a pro to the system. I actually really kind of like that. And then, so like you've got reverence points, which are kind of like your edges or your bennies.
Yeah.
They're like just raw sort of points.
You can use them.
You can use them in define things.
Yeah.
One of the other interesting things too is in the melee multiplier and the projectile multiplier. And like I mentioned, your strength dice and your perception dice will modify those. So we'll get into that in the combat section, but understand that there is such thing as a multiplier for melee and projectile, and the better you are in strength or perception, the more damage you can potentially do with your firearms, because it increases the multiplier to your dice.
Yep. And then the body type that they put in body type. Now, I thought that was kind of an interesting mechanic in 7C, that you could have advantages that made you, like, basically very beautiful or very ugly, and that changed the way people perceived you and affected, charisma and social roles.
Yeah.
They took it to a whole new level in this game.
Yeah, so there's just a chart, and you just choose off of it.
Yeah.
You just basically just fill in the dots on it. But you've got appearance, body type, and reasoning. And this is, like I said, where that reasoning comes in for your cognitive resistance. So for appearance, it's anywhere from beautiful to average to downright creepy. If you are beautiful, again, you just choose this. You just tell me what you are. Appearance gives persuasion and leadership buffs, because obviously you're pretty. People want to do what you say. But
Negatives
gives negatives to intimidation
and blending in.
And
I like that.
You stand out.
Yeah. Whereas if you're average, you can blend in, but you don't get anything else.
You don't get anything, but it's a huge buff to blending in and disguise.
On the other hand, if you're creepy, you get to intimidate and blend in, but you're not very good at persuading.
Yes.
Or leading, so, yeah.
And then you got your body type. Again, it's anywhere from big and beefy to small but quick. And it's a straight trade-off between an HP bonus and a reaction defense bonus.
Yep.
So basically, do you want to be smaller and harder to hit but fragile? Or do you want to be big, beefy, but the size of a brick wall?
Yeah.
And easy to hit?
Yeah. Reasoning.
And then reasoning was interesting.
Naive to scientific to straight up nuts.
Yeah. Nuts is actually one of the things in there.
Yeah.
And what this does is it grants a cognitive resistance bonus, which is basically mental armor, mental fortitude. Modifies your resist to stress, your initiative, your intuition, and possibly even your occult lore. Because if you're a little crazy, you might be able to see things in some interesting ways. Feels very Lovecraftian, like you said.
Very much so.
Very Lovecraftian.
Yeah. I mean, I was able to look at this chart and easily put together all of the different scientists and wackos from all of the movies and see where all of this fit in. And I went, this is between this section, the appearance, the body type, and reasoning, are neat things that could be thrown into other games.
Oh, yeah.
100%.
Yeah,
I would love to see this in Savage World. I would love to see this in 7th Sea. Systems like that where you have a lot of social and leadership type events going on, and yet you still have these values that can be weighed against them, and you know what people look like and why that has meaning.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So
I mean, but altogether though, it's definitely a lot. It's a lot more involved, especially with when you start into the substats, where you're deriving so many things, and you've got to cross-calculate so many other things. Especially if you're new to the system, it really felt to me like it would be very difficult there's a steep learning curve for new players.
Yeah, especially ones who aren't who have a hard time taking abstract ideas without a lot of paper and hard playthrough.
Well, for me, it was the fact that so many of these stats are derived from so many things. And so, just in my own assessment of it, I was thinking, like, wow, if you didn't know that the importance of the, death resistance, death or KO resistance proficiency.
Right.
Or the awareness reaction proficiency, like if you didn't understand the true value of those things, you could really seriously end up like screwing your character over, because there's like 3 or 4 or 5 different places you need to look to build a good survivable character in this.
But at the same time, it kind of allows you to build a character based upon just a bunch of stats that you're like, yeah, that seems right, and this seems right, so I guess this is who I am now.
Yeah, sure. I mean, you can always throw stats at the board and see what sticks.
My thought is this: in the sense of the way the character creation goes, it kind of gives you the same feel as TMNT, where if you know all the numbers and you know all the pieces, Palladium style, you can build an unbelievable murder box.
Oh, I got huge Palladium vibes for it.
Yeah, or
huge Palladium vibes.
If you just start pulling stuff together, you can come up with some pretty crazy combinations to have, people, like just weird people.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
In weird situations, and things happen.
Absolutely.
So.
All right, so we get into the combat section here.
Oh, Lord.
For the first note. Oh, boy.
Very big Shadowrun feels for me in this.
Yeah.
Huge.
All right, so
Please don't fall asleep.
I wrote out all this stuff.
You shouldn't
have.
have.
What? I shouldn't have.
You really shouldn't have.
I'm just give you some of the highlights here because
it feels like Shadowrun.
It's very super granular.
Yes.
So things you need to know about combat in SCP. The combat turn is 2 seconds, as opposed to 6 seconds, which has kind of become the industry standard, I think.
Yeah.
And so you're moving at a third the pace of your typical D&D combat here.
Right.
So things like, I ready my weapon, is your action.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's it. You get 2 actions per turn. Initiative is rolled based off of your intelligence plus your initiative proficiency.
Mm-hmm.
It's a skill
Mm-hmm.
that you can buy. Stays locked in the entire combat, very much like D&D, where
Mm-hmm.
you come back to the top of the order and you do it all over again.
Mm-hmm.
Interestingly enough, the highest initiative actually gets some bonuses, where you get bonus to your defense rolls. Your react action is free,
Mm-hmm.
and which is basically kind of like holding your action. And then counterattacking is harder versus this character. If I do something and you want to counterattack me over it, it's more difficult for you. It costs you, I think, more actions to do so.
Gotcha.
Because I'm just moving that fast that you can't deal with it.
So it for speed's sake, makes fast things exceptionally dangerous.
Yes.
Or easy to get out of situations.
Now, one thing that I did take note of, very much like 7th C, you have an active defense and a passive defense.
Yes.
And so we've made reference earlier to the reaction defense. That is your passive defense. Essentially, if you are not actively trying to dodge, that's your armor class, basically.
Effectively.
That's the to-hit number for you. Right. However, if you take a defense action as one of your actions for the turn, you get to roll dexterity plus your dodge block score.
Right.
And that becomes your new AC.
Right.
Your new to hit number. The other thing that really kind of struck me, and this getting real granular here.
Yeah, exceptionally.
Real granular.
If you're talking about the shooting.
Stances.
Yeah.
So there is an action you can take called Ready, Aim, Fire. While you are moving around and you have a weapon out, you're assumed to be hip firing it. As in, you're not really, like, your arm is not up, you're not pointing it, but you can still fire it.
Right.
You know, but hip firing is kind of like if you're like bent at the elbow, firing from around where your ribs are. Whereas, if you take the Ready, Aim, Fire action, you move from hip firing to ready, which is your arm is up and extended, but you're not braced. You know how you see shooters like put their offhand against the pistol to brace it? That's aimed. Take that hand away, you've got ready. Pull it down to your side, you've got hip fire. Every firearm has 3 values to it. It's hip fire, it's ready, and its aim value. And you take that bonus or penalty, depending on what it is, depending on what stance you're in.
But then also firearms have recoil. Yes. And the recoil, after fired, pulls down your stance.
Subtracts itself from your stance.
Right.
So like an M1911, it's a very common .45 caliber pistol, has a recoil of 1. So if I take 2 actions, that's an entire round, to ready and then aim my pistol, I don't get to fire it, because I only get 2 actions a round. Next turn, I fire it twice as my actions. Recoil of 1 takes my first shot from aimed down to ready. Recoil of 1 takes my next shot from ready down to hip fire.
Yep.
I then need to spend more actions to aim it again. In Overwatch, our resident Shadowrun fan is in the live chat going, "Why do I like this so much?"
It's because you love granular systems,
Because you love granular systems.
You've always loved granular systems.
Yeah. That's what I thought. I read it and I was just aghast.
Yeah.
And then I was like, who would love this?
Chris would love this. Chris would absolutely love this. And there are other people I know who would absolutely love this because of the fact that it is granular and it thinks about all the little things.
So then you got damage.
Right.
So you're going to have 2 different damage values on every weapon. Okay, you're going to have your base damage and your X damage. Base damage never gets modified. You always roll those dice.
Right.
X damage gets multiplied by your melee or projectile modifier, depending on which it is.
Right.
So if you're exceptionally strong, your X damage might be 1d6 plus 1. Well, if you're exceptionally strong, you might have a melee multiplier of times 3. That means your base damage is maybe, 3d6. The X damage is 1d6 plus 1 times 3. So that's an extra 3d6 plus 3 that you're rolling for a total of 6d6 plus 3.
That's crazy.
And that's because you're super strong.
Yep.
Perception does the same thing to
bullets. Yep.
So there's a little bit of math involved there, but honestly, I kind of like this. Again, it's a little, it's crunchier than I would like.
Way crunchier
than I like. I mean, I'm a huge Savage Worlds fan, so Fast Furious Fun is my new motto for everything.
Well, because then right after damage, you also have the whole grazing hit thing, where if you hit at a 0.3 or less, it ignores the X damage, but not the base damage.
You always do the base damage, but you ignore the X damage, right?
Even if it's monstrous, And then you have death saves that come after that, because if you get put into the negative, you still have bleed out, and then you still have your resistances against bleed out, and then you have your delaying for critical successes.
Yeah,
or stabilizing.
So your death save is basically you're rolling, and this is again another one of those proficiencies that if you didn't know existed might screw you in the end. Is resist death /KO. That's a proficiency. You roll fate plus resist death, and your difficulty is the amount you're in the negative. So if you're at negative HP, negative 15 HP, your difficulty for that roll is 15.
Right.
And the funny thing is, if you succeed, like normally in other games, like if you're taking your death saves, you save a certain amount of them, you'll stabilize, right?
Right.
Not in this. If you pass that, you take 1 damage, hence it raises your difficulty for the next roll, but you live another turn.
Right.
That's the best you can hope for.
Right.
And so it's like what you're trying to do is hang on until medical intervention gets there.
But you can, if you have exertion left, you can take actions during those phases.
And this is one of those things, like I said, I cringed my way through reading this system because it's just so far against what I personally like. But holy cow, I love that rule.
Agent Coulson.
Yeah.
You can Agent Coulson it.
My brain went to Saving Private Ryan.
Oh, yeah. That's another one, yeah.
Was it Tom Hanks at the end of the movie where he's firing his pistol?
At the tank.
He's completely shell-shocked, like his ears are ringing, he doesn't know what the hell's going on. He just pulls out his pistol and just starts firing it at the tank.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, he was practically dead.
Yeah.
Or he would have been, anyways.
Yeah, he would have very much been.
But
now, what gets me about all of that is what happens just before combat. Combat is a very specific thing. Once you're in combat, initiative, damage, all that stuff goes into play. But if you are literally just before combat, maybe you're in a conversational scene. You're all in a boardroom on like the 26th floor, and there's conversations going on, and then a sniper bullet comes through the window.
And the executive's head explodes.
That person dies. Why? Because it happened. It did not happen in combat. It just happened. And that's the difference. Now, the moment that bullet flies, now you're in combat. Now things are happening. Now there's... But that's the whole point of it, is that you can have these quote-unquote attack actions or combat actions that happen before the combat round starts.
Yeah.
That are There's no assumption of that they fit into any of the combat mechanics, and it's explicitly stated that way in the rules, so that things like the guy gets pulled through the wall after something bursts, out of the wall and stabs him through the chest.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so he's dead, and now we're in combat.
Yeah, now we're in combat, and you're all watching this guy literally get pulled through the wall, and you're like, okay, an alien just pulled him through the wall. Great.
Yes. An SCP.
Yes. I'm not even going to get into mutilations. It's ridiculous that there's actually a card and roll for mutilations in this game.
Yeah, and that's I think probably the last thing to mention here is that there are 2 optional card decks.
Yeah.
There are QR codes actually in the rule book that will link you to the Drive-Thru RPG page.
Yes.
To purchase them as peripherals. They are optional rules. One of them can be
I think one's the drama deck.
Yeah, one of them can be rolled. The mutilations can just be rolled.
But the drama deck, you literally, it's referenced in the book, but they barely tell you what it is.
Yeah, and I guess it works a little bit like the Savage Worlds Adventure deck, if you know about that, where it's kind of got like special plot complications, and the players are able to kind of have a small hand of these and introduce them into the game as they see fit.
Yeah.
Just to kind of add sort of randomness and give the players a little bit of agency over how the story's going.
All right, I'll frankly say that I was drinking and enjoying that conversation and did not stop after 15 minutes.
You're correct. You did
but I think we did pretty good. I think we got through the meat and potatoes of the mechanics. But the real question is, how does this game weigh out in the end?
Right. So what do you think it does well?
I think if we look at the mechanics, it is crunchy as much as Shadowrun is crunchy.
Mm-hmm.
And literally the book drips from the crunch. Like, there, without a doubt, he hit the ground running with, I'm going to tell you how all these actions work. I'm not going to bury it in pages. I'm not going to, fluff it by explaining this ability gives you this thing, and you need to go to this page to read about this to handle how to grapple, with these 26 rules. No. Grappling is really outlined right here, very specifically. This is when you do it in combat.
Yes.
Kind of a thing. And I think that was done exceptionally well. So when you're looking for a rule or an understanding, it is very explicit and very easy to find.
Yep. I thought the dice system was very interesting in it.
Okay.
I think roll and keep systems aren't terribly common, and so I'm always a little bit delighted when I see one. And it's definitely a unique take on the typical attribute system. Typically, we jot a number down, and that number just represents everything. But the idea that it's not even a number; it's a dice pool, and purchasing the dice on kind of a grid, and each one of those grid squares gives you a little something depending on, or maybe a lot of something depending on the die you're purchasing. Was very interesting to me. I'm not sure again if I quite like it. But I will give it points for being intuitive, for being inventive, and definitely giving us a fresh look at what attributes could be.
Yeah, I would tend to agree that it gives some points, and for those who are listening, our stream may have just came back, so be prepared for catch up or lag. So yeah, I do think it's an interesting. I just watched it up there. There was a stream issue. But I do think that was interesting, and the level system that they did in it, where it's not classed, it's not leveled, it's progression based, so it fits in that same kind of design. So you never just go from 0 to God in one game.
Yes, agreed.
The other thing that's kind of part of that is that there are a lot of DM assists in it. There's a whole section that basically is a game, a whole game session written out. All the verbal that happens between the players, the characters,
even the side conversation,
conversations,
it feels
everything, and it goes through an entire couple scenes, which is fantastic, all the way to the end. So it paints a very vivid picture of how to play the game. Yeah. And the feel of the game that it's trying to put out.
And especially like when you get to the back of the book, and it's got a bunch of suggested SCPs in there.
Oh God, yeah.
And it doesn't have like the full SCP articles, but actually each one has a QR code
that you can go right to.
Go right to the actual SCP.
I think that is one of the beautiful things about the game is there's QR codes throughout the whole thing that point right back to the wiki.
Yes.
So
each one of those SCPs actually has a director's section in there to tell you, be like really super cautious if you use this SCP. Don't throw this in there willy-nilly, and if you do, you may want to play it like this. Otherwise, it just wipes the group.
Right.
You know,
Right.
like this thing's trick is it one shot kills people.
Right.
You know, so if you're trying to tell this type of story, like, don't have them fight it.
Right.
You know, but you can use it like this.
Right. What doesn't this system do well?
Okay, so Sean and I actually had a really long conversation about this at dinner last night.
You keep going. I'm going to pause so that we can extend the show, but keep going.
Okay, and I think what we came down to is that a lot of the game systems that you and I have reviewed, a lot of the game systems that we've looked over or even played during our time, all have a particular feel to them. They all kind of gear themselves towards a particular type of game.
Right.
And I don't think SCP has that. It feels, for all of its bang and all of its bluster and all of its detail, it doesn't feel like anything. You know, it feels very simulationist in nature.
Right, and I was going to say that.
In that it's got the very granular, gritty detail to every action you take, with an eye in the advancement, and the eye in the gameplay, the combat especially. But I couldn't tell you what the game feels like.
So
I didn't think it felt like a creepy government conspiracy game.
To me, it feels like an alien's adventure game, or alien adventure game, depending on which movie you liked more. Where it is very gritty. It is very much a mechanics based game. And to me, that felt odd for something that is, in essence, global storytelling. So you're taking something that started as this very creative, very open-ended, very accepting of editing and narrative, and giving it fixed, hard walls and numbers and a metric system and a slide rule to play. Yeah. And that was like, wow. Like, in one aspect, I'm like, that does not make sense to me. Yeah. Like, this should be played with the Fate system.
Savage Worlds,
or something exceptionally basic. Like, I could see someone doing this with the Jenga tower. Yeah. 100%.
Yeah, 100%.
You could have simplified the whole thing, but at the same time, it wouldn't have had the XCOM feel. It wouldn't have had that us against the thing. But when the thing isn't Lovecraftian horror that needs to be taken care of by top men, the game system kind of feels way over the top.
Yeah, and that was kind of the thing, is like, I know, like, everyone goes to the idea of, Black Ops soldiers armed to the teeth to go bring in the scary monster.
Sure.
But, like, I was reading you an SCP at dinner, and it was literally just an object that if you try to write about it or talk about it, you make at least one typo per sentence.
Yeah.
It's unavoidable. It always happens.
But does that make a good story?
Well, it may be. I mean, like, that thing in and of itself? No.
Right.
But my point is that not all SCPs are dangerous, scary monsters.
No.
Okay? In fact, quite a few of them aren't. I would say the greater majority of them aren't.
Right.
There are absolutely a great number of scary monsters in there, but not, like, I mean, there's also I Am a Toaster. There's my absolute favorite one, and all it is just a toaster that makes that, as long as you're around it, you refer to it in the first person.
Yeah.
You always say, "I am a toaster."
Right.
What's that thing sitting on the table? Oh, that's me. I'm a toaster.
Right.
I'm sitting on the table.
Yeah, it's hard to understand, but like,
but the longer you stay around it, the more you try to emulate a toaster. To the point of, like, eating bread and trying to lick a wall socket, because you need to be plugged in.
But that's hard for players to follow.
It is.
So here's my thought.
But here's the thing, though.
Okay.
Is that, you ever see the old show Warehouse 13?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. That's the style I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where you've got all these crazy things around you,
Mm-hmm.
okay? Sometimes those crazy things are helpful to you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you get here, you get an assault rifle. Here, you get a submachine gun. Here, you get the zap gun. What's the zap gun? Oh, it's SCP-474. We found this out on the, give them a little backstory. We don't know how it works, but you point it at something, there's a big burst of static, and then it's gone. Okay, where does it go? I don't know. We haven't figured it out.
Yep.
Here's the file for it if you want to read about it, though.
Yeah.
And try to figure it out. Maybe you can do some field research. But we've determined it's more or less safe unless you point it at something and pull the trigger. Okay.
Yeah.
And then you've got, there's one of the SCPs is literally just a Little Caesars hot and ready pizza box.
Mm-hmm.
And if you hold it and you open it, it always has your favorite pizza in there.
Okay.
Even if you don't know what your favorite pizza is, even if you're
does.
indecisive, it knows. Whatever that pizza is going to be the most delicious pizza you've ever tasted. And it works for everything. Like, they literally... this is one of those great SCPs where they start giving it to other SCPs.
Mm-hmm.
And so you get some cross-reference in the SCP thing, where it's like, yeah, we gave it to SCP-123, and it opened it up and it was a plain cheese pizza. SCP-123 was very thankful for this, as he had not had a cheese pizza in a while. We gave it to SCP-4224. It was covered in blood and eyeballs. It was devoured in seconds. They literally just keep this thing in the break room.
Yeah.
It's perfectly safe,
Mm-hmm.
and it cuts down on costs for food, for
Right.
catering.
Right.
You know?
But
and it's an SCP.
But my thought is that you also have the other thing, which is X-Files, where
Yeah.
the stories were less, I wouldn't say less about the paranormal, but more about the things wrapped around the paranormal. The idea that you had a full moon night where people were afraid of fear,
Mm-hmm.
and that drove all kinds of events to occur.
Yeah.
You know, someone's looking for trying to find a chupacabra, but the story isn't about the chupacabra. It's about people crossing the border.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it just happens that the Border Patrol people keep, finding mutilations and thinking it's the border, the people crossing the border killing people. And so they're wanting to make it more and more dangerous for them to cross the border, and that's not the problem.
Yeah.
And come to find out there's, they have to explain it away as a pack of wild dogs that were mutated by, nuclear explosives from the 60s, from the 40s and 50s that had been tested in the area, when in fact it was chupacabra,
Right.
and those have now been contained. So, but the story goes beyond the object, and I think that's the key, is that you can tell stories beyond the Black Ops side of things with this, but the game gives you that ability to do that. You could 100% play any type of game within this system, but it gives you the flexibility of having heavy combat when you want it.
Yes.
Heavy, finite, chunky, crunchy combat.
Now, one of the other things that I think is a great storytelling avenue for a game like this, too, is I mentioned that there are other organizations out there, like you said, like the Church of the Broken God and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
In the SCP universe. So I think whereas this game positions you as a member of the SCP Society, or the SCP Foundation, I would actually say more so than interacting with SCPs, I would love to see a great little shadow war going on between the SCP Foundation and one or more of these outside organizations, possibly ones from outside of our reality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
there's a lot of wiggle.
There was a restaurant chain that's multidimensional that they reference.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, that was that's being affected by other groups, but effectively it's just a restaurant that's in multiple dimensions.
Oh, okay, cool.
Simultaneously.
Yeah.
So they're not positive nor negative, but they're there and reliable.
Yeah, and reliable, and the burgers are decent.
Yeah, kind of thing. So, all right, we do have a couple questions, and I think they're really good, and I'd like to get those in before we close it up for the night.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Knox asks, say what you will about creepypasta, but I think it's cool that we live in an age where inspiration, wherever it comes from, can be found and transformed into group activities that strengthens bonds and celebrates and promotes even more inspires. What are some notable tabletop RPGs that sprung forth from unlikely places? Do you have a favorite origin for a game?
I had to really think about this one.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure I have a really great satisfactory answer. I would love to just spin a yarn about some great, game that popped up from some weird-ass idea and got transmitted through a bunch of other people and then finally became the shining example of role-playing that it is nowadays, but I don't. Most games I know of were designed to be games, designed by game designers for a specific purpose to tell a specific type of story. And that's not really the great little tale of, I think, telephone that you're looking for. The best I can come up with is that both Dungeons & Dragons and Savage Worlds, way back in their infancy, started out as miniatures tabletop games.
Yep.
Dungeons & Dragons, back in its infancy, was a little game called Chainmail. And Savage Worlds was a skirmish warfare rule set for the Deadlands setting.
Yep.
And in both of those instances, people looked at those and went, what if this were more?
Yeah.
What's the story behind this character? How can I tell the story behind this character? Can we create some downtime rules for them? Can we create some other weird interaction rules for them? What if they had more skills than just shooting each other?
Yeah.
And they, through that process, grew up into what we know them to be today.
I have two.
Full-fledged role-playing games.
One's a reverse of the other. So,
okay.
In one case, I love the birth story of Vampire the Masquerade. I love that it was basically a bunch of guys who wrote games on their way to a convention, and someone just in the car said, who the hell would live in a place like this? As they're driving through the skirts of Chicago, basically Gary, Indiana, which is old industrial, and there's a lot of rundown there.
Real
There's a
Rust
lot of
Belt
old
stuff, yeah.
Old buildings, rundown stuff. And one of them just goes, vampires. Modern-day vampires would live here. And all the creativity that flowed out of that moment.
Yeah.
And over the next 48 hours to create the core of Vampire the Masquerade. Wow. It was just pure creativity pouring from a very simple question and start point. In the opposite of that, where you have a game and players and an in-depth story and this amazing world that the players put together and these deep relationships and it expanded into The Expanse, the TV show.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the reverse that comes out of it. I think
we can't tell you about a role-playing game that started as a TV show, but we can tell you about a TV show that started as a role-playing game.
But that's where I think that kind of creative juices become really neat.
As far as I remember, too, the Elder Scrolls actually came from a D&D game that was going on between some of the Bethesda developers.
That totally makes sense.
I'm pretty sure that's where Tamriel originated.
That totally makes sense.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's those kinds of things that I've heard of, or the stories that I know. I know there are other stories out there, and I know there's a lot of smaller games, more indie games that don't get, and I say smaller in the sense that they're indie, there's probably still thousands and thousands of people who play them.
Sure.
That really love them because they started from that kind of a small wonder following and became something unbelievable in the end.
Yeah.
And I love that. I love that kind of stuff. So yeah, I would say Vampire the Masquerade is my favorite creative game that came from a very simple origin.
Yeah, right on.
So,
all right. So, Overwatch asks, is there an object or artifact from a different setting or mythos that comes to mind as a great centerpiece for an SCP-themed campaign? And why that one? So, a non-SCP thing that you think should be an SCP, basically, and would make a great centerpiece for a game.
So in 7th C, they had a really simplistic artifact that was from an ancient culture, and basically it was these silver orbs. They weren't metallic, they weren't ceramic, but they were basically just like ball bearings. Not a lot of, like, the etching on them was very fine. You had to stare at it under a certain light to even be able to see it. But if you just held it in your hand, it just felt slightly warm, like it had been sitting in the sun. Not hot.
Sure.
And it wouldn't, snow could still fall and it wouldn't melt it or anything like that, but you could feel there was a little warmth there.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, if you set it down on any surface, anywhere, and just tapped it once, it would start rolling with force, even uphill.
Mm-hmm.
And stop at a solid object. It would try and figure a way around the solid object to keep moving in a direction.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was trying to get to the other orb it was tied to.
Yep.
And unless you knew that, you didn't know where it was going.
I think we had those in your game.
You did.
We were using them to find, my ex-boyfriend Helmut?
Correct, because you snuck one in his pocket.
Yeah. and then that jerk used it as, the linchpin for a Gatling gun or something like that. Some sort of a weird-ass invention that he made.
Correct. He found that it was the right size for an operational part. And didn't realize that it was tied to something else. But that kind of a thing, and the fact that it's such a simple object, a simple indestructible object at that.
Yeah.
That it could be oddly misunderstood very easily through experimentation.
Yeah.
And that it's not dangerous or anything, but it tends to want to go in one direction, and sometimes that direction changes, and we don't know why.
Right.
And it's because the other orb is moving between handlers who are doing the exact same thing. They move it all over the world, and the other people are moving it all over the world to try and figure out what it's doing.
Yeah.
And in the end, no one ever comes of it. So I think that would be fun. I think that would be a kind of a fun thing.
I thought a little bit about this. I'm sure this is probably isn't the best answer I could give, but there is a... I'm a fan of an old Bungie software series, way back even before Halo and stuff like that, called Myth: The Fallen Lords.
Yes.
And there was an artifact in there called the Tane, and it was basically looked like a big D8, about the size of a lamp.
Yeah.
And it was a pocket dimension.
Mm-hmm.
There was these awful... We'll just call them werewolf-like things.
Sure.
That's their closest analog, was just
Sure.
basically werewolves, called the Murcridia.
Mm-hmm.
And they, during this war, they were just awful, and basically ran across the countryside and destroyed everything they touched. And so somebody created the Tane, and it's this pocket dimension. It basically just locked them all away.
Mm-hmm.
We couldn't get rid of them, but we could remove them from the world,
Mm-hmm.
And in one of the other stories... and then, of course, this thing gets lost, off in some, annals of time. And this evil wizard got himself put inside of it and started essentially gating the Murcridia back out of it.
Oh, Lord.
And just working from the inside. So, if you wanted to stop this guy, you had to go in there to get him.
Oh.
And so that's kind of what you end up having to do. And I thought the Tane was very cool, and that it was just this very simple little thing that held... an entire extra dimension filled with awful monsters in it, and was just a tiny little prison you could carry in your backpack.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of neat things that other people have created in other games, or explained that would definitely be SCPs without question.
Oh, absolutely.
Because they'd be completely horribly misunderstood.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. So. I think that does it for our questions and such like that. You got any final thoughts on SCP, the role-playing game?
I think people should, if you're interested in creative writing and you want some stuff, or maybe you're running a game that's modern day or even futuristic, and you need something weird, go randomly search through the SCP archives. Set a timer so you don't get lost for days in there. But go to the SCP site, click on a few of the links, and... just read through some of them, because some of them, especially the curated ones that are considered canon, are really good, and they're really well done. And I applaud the authors who wrote those and took the time, and the people who keep it going. I think it's wonderful. So I would say go and look, because I think you can have a lot of fun reading through some of these very, very creative ideas. Some that are very creepy, but some that are just neat. and fun to read up on. And I would encourage people to do that. I think you can really enjoy yourself. So
yeah, absolutely. All right, so next week's topic, we're going to be talking about why tone matters.
Ooh, tone, yes. Tone.
So it's going to be maybe a little esoteric because it's not something. It's quite a stat that you can talk about, but just the general tone or feel of a game and why that matters.
Yeah, we kind of got into an idea of talking about this with Seth, and I was really hoping to get him back on the show for this one.
Yeah, and we kind of talked about it a little bit tonight. We're just where SCP doesn't feel like anything.
Right.
At least the rules don't. And that's kind of what we're talking about. Is that tone, that feel.
Yeah. So like whether you're not you're falling into the Cthulhian mythos or it's about the mystery, or it's about the people, and the mystery sits at the fringes of it, if you will, and just becomes kind of the background window dressing. But in any case.
Yep. All right. You can find us up on Twitter at @ST_Conclave, on Instagram at @ST_Conclave. Listen to us live every Wednesday night, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, up on mixlr.com/storyteller-conclave. And join us up on our Discord. We'd love to hear hear from you, join the discussion, talk to the other storytellers there, and drop some questions for the show. You can find that link on our Twitter or at our website, storytellerconclave.com.
We'd like to thank our Patreon named members, Knox in the Box, Sam, the Arcane Asylum, Sparkle Motion Veteran, and Hulavu. We really appreciate everything you do and help us every time we put one of these things together. Our pre-show music was by Arcane Anthems. You can find that at patreon.com/arcaneanthems. Our intro music, which was Beyond the Warriors, is by Geefrog. You can find that at geefrog.bandcamp.com or on Google Music. And our outro music, which you're hearing right now, is Only Our Footprints in the Sand by Mater Machine. You can find that at freemusicarchive.org.
Big shout out as always to our families, Vicky and Sean. Thank you so much for loving and supporting us. All of our friends who sat with us at our tables over the years and given us these great stories and experiences to share with you. And you, every single one of our listeners. We love you so much.
Love you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.